Hey guys, we're back with the Mind Body broadcast. Austin and Marty here, and today we're going to talk about cyclical dieting strategies, refeeding, um, cheat meals, all that stuff that you probably think's true that might not be true.
Hmm.
Uh, we had a pretty good discussion beforehand, just kind of plotting out some points. So there are a few things that might even ruffle some feathers here. Hopefully,
Absolutely,
that's some
yeah.
of
There's a little bit too much misconceptions going on about even what they mean, right? Which is funny enough. Like you hear refeed, and then people can kind of get that carried away, and they turn the refeed into like a shitload. Whereas I was taught that a refeed is a structured amount or time of carbohydrates. So, when you first heard refeed, what did you think it was, Austin?
I was luckily I had good information right off the bat, so I knew that refeed was not a cheat meal and that they were not the same thing.
Awesome, awesome.
Traditionally, refeed would, in general terms, would mean more carbohydrate based and
Hmm.
less, and less fat based, and then obviously contain some protein, but normally lower protein.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. Because I don't know if it was the invention of the if it fits your macros crowd. Because I noticed around 2010 or so was when the misinformation started popping up. Like I first learned. I think it was through Lyle McDonald's The Ketogenic Diet when I first heard of the CKD, Cyclical Ketogenic Diet, the TKD, the Targeted Ketogenic Diet, and then obviously SKD, the Standard Ketogenic Diet. And then he went into things about refeeds. And that's when I first found out that how like timing, length, amount of carbohydrates, and then clearly type can come into play. But it was never ever fat refeeds or like not the and if those we'll flat out call them shitloads, like in that you'll see we'll talk into too, which can mean obviously as the statement says anything in there kind of goes, and that could be for an amount of time or that could be amount of food as well. But yeah, and then you see exactly some say, oh, I'm going out for my refeed meal. And then it's like no, but like I'm one of those weird guys that I do really like things to be, we'll say, classified or named correctly, just because but it's never going to be standard, right? Like how many times have you heard side laterals, which really doesn't make that means side or but it's like
Eh,
shoulder, yeah, it should be like side raises, but it's side lateral, which is side out. So super funny. But yeah, I think you know where I'm going with that one. So which ones have you used, and which ones do you like the best? Let's go start there.
oh man, so
Quick.
that's yeah, right, exactly. Okay, so I've used all of them. What I can say without going into, tons of context, right off the bat here is that usually for a free meal or a cheat meal or whatever you want to call it, I that is only going to be used for a couple reasons or a shitload or whatever you want to use. I would say there's certain cosmetic purposes of that. Potentially, that's if I know, for example, if I know somebody is going to react well to that, they're hard to fill out. I use it as a pre-show, just simply a cosmetic.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's not serving the purpose of upregulating metabolism, offsetting those negative metabolic adaptions, none of that. Um, and then obviously, I guess maybe for psychological reasons, you could use it. Um, if it's like a sanity thing for the person, you know that it's going to benefit them in that regard, then potentially. And then with refeeds, now this is where it gets a little tricky because refeeding would be, well, there's a couple things. It would kind of depend on how depleted is the person, how downregulated is their metabolism, how low are their leptin levels,
Mm-hmm.
what kind of adaptions have occurred. So
Mm-hmm.
do I need to usually the more the adaptions have occurred, the more I, I don't want to say the more aggressive I have to be with the refeed. I mean, I guess that's one word for it, but normally the longer refeed that they will need.
Love it. Yep.
Yeah, and I can, like I said, I'll go into my own prep because that was literally the perfect example.
Yeah, sure, man.
And
We
we
could
can
do like
go
a
into that.
mini case study and just see what you did, and then so that they can
Sure.
gain kind of a firsthand experience of that too. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, the long and short of it is that I have a very adaptable metabolism. So what happens to me is, in order you could say that, oh, we want to create, and goes back to the cyclical thing, and people argue, well, if you just create a deficit over a week, it doesn't matter. But the problem is that everyone adapts differently to a deficit.
That's
And
right.
so, yeah, in my case, if I create such a small deficit that I'm, technically on paper, I'm in a calorie deficit, what will happen is my body just tends to adapt to it. So
Right.
what I would prefer doing is a larger deficit with refeeds as needed, but my refeeds end up being longer.
Hmm.
Um, and I'll let you go into, I won't go into all the technicalities of it because I'll let you have that portion. But as far as like lengths, I mean, I was getting up to where I was taking my total amount of carbohydrates for the refeed.
Hmm.
Towards the end of my prep, I mean, I was show lean, so I was seeing what kind of refeeds I could handle and also like what cosmetic effect it had. But I basically took what I thought would be my saturation point as far as being almost, 80% full. Um,
Hmm.
and I take that total amount of carbohydrates and spread it over 2 to 3 days.
Okay.
Uh, because if you take someone that's completely, inside out depleted, like they're just sucked down to where, I mean, I would get so depleted that I could pull like, 4 or 5 inches of skin off of my stride and
Yeah, yeah,
quad.
yeah. Exactly.
You know what I mean? So I was taking, hey, I think that I'll probably be relatively full on 1,400 carbs. But you also got to figure, hey, I could be in those 3 days. I might still be training in there somewhere. So I'm redepleting a little bit of it.
Right.
But just say that's that number because I was getting in 1,500 grams the last couple, and I would spread it over 3 days. And yeah, I mean, I would be pretty much full by the end. I would gain small amount of weight, not a lot, and I would go right back down to hitting my low again, before the next refeed, of course. And yeah, I mean, and the reason for that is just the fact that your one meal is not going to reverse those adaptions, and that's, like I said, that's what we were talking about before the show.
Hmm.
The fact that one meal isn't going to reverse downregulated leptin, downregulated metabolism, all of the hormonal adaptions. And I mean, 3 days really isn't going to make it 100% better. But I would say that the literature shows that refeeding over a longer period, usually more than 24 hours, is going to be more beneficial in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. There is, I think, some of the pioneers on this stuff where were Eric Helms and his team did that as well. And I know it was something along the lines of anywhere between the 24-hour period and I think even the 36 into the 48 showed. And this of course was on Natural Athletes, and they showed that the benefits started to really shine during that second day in terms of upward regulated of T3 thyroid function, up regulated in leptin. Then not only that, but then just general function. You have to think how good you slept like on those days of that overfeeding, right? Which that, of course, what sleep induce more growth hormones. So therefore, you're trying to, as best as you can, while attempting to rip down, attempting to keep as healthy and things as optimal, which will in fact make the fat loss speedier. So like, and that's where I'll start with too, is that assessing when to know when to refeed, right? That is probably the biggest bane of my existence, and I know that's a strong statement in the nutrition world at the moment, is people that will now write me and say, oh yeah, I refeed, and they'll pick their terms, whatever they want to call for refeed, because that's just how it goes. Oh, I refeed this, and this on these days, and they are, let's say, out of 15% body fat for a male and out of 22% for a female, and just they have no business refeeding, right? So because
Right.
in that, and we talked about that before about the super compensation, is that you do need to get there. You do need to earn and or need the refeeds, because you have to think, if you were a larger body fatted individual, your body is already firing on all cylinders. It's got all the reserve wood, it's got reserve gas. So until you get down to that point, even if you do want to do some kind of crash diet to kick off things to start and put yourself in a pretty whopping deficit, that body fat is there. That's your backup. So, and that depends upon the mentality of the client. It depends upon how soon the show is that they want to get ready for. I'm not recommending that you kill yourself to get on stage or things, but if you have a deadline for whatever reason, is that you can be more aggressive, you won't need that refeed yet, especially if you are that heavy. So don't get too hyper excited about it, right? So, and then we'll say the warning signs of when you do need a refeed. I always like to ask my clients what their temperature is like, because that clearly, if they're not running as hot, that means that things could be definitely slowing down metabolically. Obviously, energy levels, and then usually even either on the same diet or minor adjustments, they either stay the same weight or they might be even gain weight on the same diet. And of course, I ask for if the sleep was the same, if their water level is the same, because that means that processes have been slowing too much. And then of course, what's another thing that takes a massive tank? Training strength and intensity. So then we have a hodgepodge, right? It's like it's almost like in you see when in space age movies when they got battleships and they're flipping on all the switches. You gotta have, I would borderline say, almost all those switches. Just because you are hungry, you don't need a refeed. Just because you made it through 4 days, you don't need a refeed. Like it needs to boil down to, and yes, Austin and I both definitely care about the psychological well-being of the client. But if you were looking, we're talking contest prep right now. If you were looking to get really lean, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to fight down past the I'm hungry and something happened in my week and I need some food. No, you just really want some food. We're not there yet. So, and I would like to ask you that too, Austin. So, for that 1,500 calories, I can't see that being as enjoyable as what some people might think it would be come that third day.
Well, I'm going to add a couple things to there.
Sure.
That real quick, just before we go. So one, you talked about high body fat. Well, leptin levels are higher when your body fat's higher. Exactly. So there you go. Right there, you probably don't need a refeed.
Exactly.
Secondly, if someone's hungry, if they're continuing to be pretty hungry, and I'm not talking about psychological hunger, like they're physically hungry, I'm normally like, that's a pretty good sign.
That's
typically
awesome. You got it.
I'm not talking like, obviously, when you're in a deficit, I mean, physical hunger is not necessarily going to be directly related to metabolism, but it is a good sign.
Of course.
And then what was the third that I was going to say? There was another one there. It'll come to me. I'll think about it.
Yeah, sure. You'll probably bounce back when you go in there. But yeah, so how hard or lack of hardness did those higher refeed days become for you? Were they hard at the beginning of the prep? They get easier at the end of the prep? Like, yeah, talk a bit about that.
You mean as far as like getting the food?
Yeah, like pure volume. So like even like maybe give me an example of some of the sources of carbs you used. Okay. Yep.
Sure. So this would show you how depleted I was the fact that I could probably have eaten those refeeds 3 times.
Yeah. Got it.
Yeah. I mean, seriously, because normally if I'm refeeding someone and they're absolutely stuffed by the end of it, I'm like, you might not have needed quite that much, because really, in a refeed, if I'm just looking to reverse all the metabolic damage, then I don't have to have them like bursting full. Mm-hmm. It's going to help. Like, I don't want their cells to be depleted 24/7, because it's harder to fill back out later. But at the same time, like, I didn't need to be like full to the gills where I was spilling over.
Right.
So, I mean, I was probably just getting to the point where I was probably like 80 or 90% full. And by the end of it, I mean, I was pretty satisfied. I could tell that my ghrelin levels, as far as like hunger and stuff, had stabilized pretty well. I was sweating. I was, after the second night, my sleep was definitely improved drastically. And then that would obviously, it would carry over for a couple days afterwards. But I mean, this is typically what would happen was I would get about a couple pretty wild things would happen. I would get about halfway into the first day. So let's say I had like 700 or 800 carbs on the first day, because I would normally go heavier and then taper
Right.
each day. So if I had 800 on the first day, well, I would get about 400 in, and I would be sweating normally because things were starting to pick up a little bit, and then my hunger would be up typically.
Yep, of course.
Yeah, yeah, and I would be hungry for for the whole rest of the refeed until I got to the end of it. But the one thing that was definitely difficult about that, and that I have to watch for when I do these, if I have to do a really crazy cyclical approach with people, is that you are basically at that point, that is like the perfect storm for a massive binge.
I'm glad you brought that up.
That is like, I mean, you could literally just completely unload on yourself and derail yourself. And I knew what I was doing, so it wasn't like, don't get me wrong, I had those feelings where psychologically I could have just ate for days, but I obviously knew what my goal was, and I was able to control it. But I mean, that's definitely a really risky situation for some people to be in. So I thought I would add that little.
That's perfect. And so what's really cool is I got 2 cases here that I'm going to definitely share about me, and we'll call them learning experiences, right? So I actually, when I first started doing refeeds, was with Skip, Ken Hill, and he had his version, which I still use today if I ever do, called skip loading. And skip loading was always carbohydrates in any kind, so it could be refined, it could be unrefined. When it does get a little bit more honed into this, Skip, don't kill me if I'm butchering this, but it was set out of a period of time. So I think my first refeed was 5 hours, eat as many carbohydrates as you can. And so in the Skip's theory behind this, and it does pan out and it does work well. I've used it with my own clients because of him, is that like if your hunger is, and then you can gauge that hunger. So like how you said that you were really hungry for that first and it didn't stop. Well, then maybe the next refeed would go to 8 hours. And then would go to 12, then would go to the whole day, and then you gauge that, right? Because as soon as that hunger, because if I say eat every carbohydrate you see during the day to various various points at stages of their prep bodybuilders, they will, we could see people have 400 carbs. Then we'll see people have 10,000 carbs. We got Juan Morel hanging out, right? So, and that'll tell you a lot about where is their actual hunger level outside of binging and stuff, right? So, and I will tell you that because of where I was from being a fat kid, is I would wake up and I'd have a bag of Skittles, gummy worms, and some frozen yogurt. Because it was my first time doing it. It said, have any carbs you want. I forget, it was 21, 22, and I was like, this is awesome. So what happened, I got maybe 30, 45 minutes in, massive tummy ache, just like Halloween, and I passed out. Because I was so tired. And then I woke up, and then it was like, oh, okay. And then I would start slowly making them better. Because I do want to touch on that, exactly what you said, is that if you take a step back and we were to write on top of one eating disorder of binging, and we were to write down controlled cyclical diet of bodybuilding, and step back, and so you couldn't see the labels on them, they would look very damn similar. And so I'm very happy you brought up the psychological aspects, because this is teeter-tottering with that, right? And so and you don't necessarily need to say to the client, like, as in this is, but you can definitely watch for it, like you said, like as in, especially if they get the refeed and then the next day they're like, oh my God, I can't stop or whatever, then we need to have some different kind of coaching practices going on too then, or maybe change the sources of the carbs, or maybe move it over to a lesser refeed, a less aggressive refeed over the course of 2 or 3 days. And I'm super happy that that's being talked about now, is the multiple day refeed, or even, I'm going to share this with you because I've been using this with quite a few of my clients. I think Eric called it intermittent caloric restriction. And so this is Eric Helms again. Like I'm going to reference this guy a lot in the podcast because I just think his work is genius. But it would be 2 or 3 days a week of just slightly bumped carbs. And because in the ration, and because he's done the studies on it too, and done the science of where not only does it boost your your levels of just like we'll say energy, but then now at least 2 days a week you're feeling more like a human as opposed to 7 of feeling not so human. And so
Right.
it's a personal dieting strategy, right? Like, for instance, I know he'd have some clients do like a Tuesday and a Friday that were higher so that at least if they went out for dinner or something, they'd have more carbohydrates or whatever. So it's just, and that's like before you get to like, we'll have to call them the actual physiological refeeds. So that's super cool too. And then that can even set you up to have those days be the refeed days, because you can do two together, which can work really well. You can do two apart, especially if the person depletes that much in the 3 days too, because and this is going to hammer home that everything Austin and I are going to want to try to convey to you in this podcast is context, and it depends. Does that make
Yep.
sense?
Yep. It does make sense. And um, I think that goes back to, if you look at a lot of those guys too, they're also a fan of, really slow, contest preps or dieting phases, just because you are going to probably create less adaptions and you have more chance to add those slight surplus days in there.
Right.
So, so that's, it's one of those things too, where I'm usually a fan of that. And I think another strategy I like to use that's really similar to that, at least the premise would be similar, would be, I could even do, let someone push pretty hard just for a certain amount of time, and then I might do a whole week reset period where I'm not necessarily doing a refeed, but I'm just putting them slightly over maintenance for the week.
Yep.
And I'm like, just coast for the week. And normally what I'll do is I'll back off cardio a little bit also. And I might even back off the intensity of training slightly that week if they need to, depending on how they feel. But yeah, I mean, that's why, hey, if I can do a 20 plus 24 week or so prep with someone and they're patient, I'm like, look, we can take 3 breaks during this prep.
Absolutely.
And,
yep.
You know what I mean? And you're probably gonna get in better shape. You're probably gonna have a little bit easier transition, hopefully, from off season, and the experience will be better.
Yeah.
So
for sure. The best, I've really subscribed to them, and so when they don't do contest prep and they just we'll say general fat loss with no real event in sight, and I did this before I read this, which I still to this day love, is that if you have events, like let's say you've got a wedding coming up, or like you're going to have to be on vacation, camping, whatever it is, excuse me, but then you can do 8 and 2 or 8 and 4, which would be 8 weeks of mild to aggressive dieting, and then back off for the 2 to 4. Because if you say to a client, Kate, we're on a fat loss phase. Okay, for how long? Well, until you're not fat.
Right.
So then, but now if you say, hey, we're going to do 8 weeks of a fat loss phase and reassess, you go, oh, okay. So then they have something tangible. They know that the lower calories, the higher cardio is going to end. That does a lot for people mentally. Because then, because if you have to think, when you embark on a fat loss journey, and you think, oh my, and like, let's say you are X weight. Who cares what it is? Let's say you think you are X weight times 2 when you're really X weight. You're gonna go, how the hell am I gonna stick with this for that long? Because there's no outcome goal. And that's gonna be another podcast. Is all about goals and stuff like that too. But if you don't have a show, take a break for those like 4 weeks, and it doesn't need to doesn't need to be a massive all-on full diet break, which I'm going to talk about in a second, but it can be higher raised calories to get you feeling normal and good again. Like you said, cardio down, maybe even one of those weeks of training is backed off a bit so that everything kind of feels good again.
Yep, I agree. I think that I like the fact that you added those kind of tangible goals in there, something that they can see and touch, if you will.
I will tell you, it makes a world of difference. That's so you know what, 8 weeks, because they're like 2 months. I can give it, and it's not even, you can get the most elementary client or novice client to commit to that. Say like, because there's so many 12-week challenges. Can you give me 8 weeks of just a moderately, where I call it tolerable hunger? Like, can you tolerate being hungry here and there to look great for 8 weeks? Yes, I can.
Yeah. Yep. I like that. I think that you can, I mean, that's a little harder to apply that to contest prep, just because I think at a point, obviously, we know that no matter how long you can drag out a prep, like, you're probably not going to feel very good when your body fat is, 6% or lower. You're just not going to feel good.
And I will definitely say that 8 and 4 is 100% not what I use for a contest prep.
Right.
100%. Like I will be very firm in saying that. And I actually, this is really great you said that. I despise when I don't know if you've got people that do it there. You probably have, let's say they sign up with me, Austin, you sign up with me at 16 weeks out, and I say to you, okay, at 12, 8, and 4 weeks out, we're going to have a cheat meal.
Oh, yeah.
How the hell, based upon pure numbers, like, this is not a mathematical goddamn equation. Like, that is not how it works here. Like, this is you get in the car, drive it. Do I know when the hubcap's going to fall off? Do I know when you're going to need a transmission change? Like, I that blows my mind. It's the same thing with saying, I want you to be 195 pounds by this week based upon, like, and now this is not someone that me and you've worked together and we've been losing 1 to 2 pounds, and I go, you know what, I think this week's gonna be 3 pounds, just what I'm seeing. No, I'm talking barely know who you are, be like, yeah, we're gonna lose 5 pounds this week. Like, where they get these direct outcomes? Like, what if you started on an antibiotic and now are you a failure because he didn't hit like that? That's why you'd psychologically set the client up for that, and so this is going to be perfect. I know I'm stealing a lot of the time on this one, Austin. I just have so much of the stuff to is when you do a refeed, if you do a cheat meal, is that don't get hung up on what number you'll be the next day. Because I have seen it. I'll use me, and we'll use into you, as I think they're already going to be different. When I used to do my skip loads, I would so they would be done on a Saturday. I would wake up. Let's say I was 190. I would wake up at 190. By the following day, I'd be about 197 to 199. Which is monstrous, but I am a water buffalo and this was trying to do super compensation. So, having said that, like, outside of, you freaking out or thinking it's muscle, which no, I just trusted Skip. And so he said, okay, weigh yourself every day for this week, because this is your first refeed. And so by that Wednesday or that Thursday at the latest, I was called back to baseline. So I was back down to that 190. And I know weight is not everything, but you have to think I do your classic anal retentive every 2 to 3 hours, eat the food, so that weight is more of a true measure. So by that Wednesday, Thursday, now that Thursday, Friday, Wednesday were true fat burning days, and that was how we knew we were hitting it right. So, then, for instance, so when you did your 2-3 day refeeds, what usually would happen with your weight come at the end of the following? And the next day following your last refeed day.
So yeah, if I would refeed like Friday, Saturday, Sunday on a Monday, oddly enough, by the end of it, I would actually not be up that much.
That's what I want to see, and that's just your propensity, right?
And I think that obviously the reason was I was up the most after the first day, but for obvious reasons, because I ate 800 carbs or whatever.
Correct.
But after that point, my only real goal after that point was just make sure I was in a slight caloric surplus for the next couple of days. So I mean, the numbers dropped. So obviously I lost a lot of that initial weight from the first day, but yeah, I mean, I've done skip loading type protocols with people too, like as far as the window of time type of thing.
Yep.
And I actually use that's something I do with, I want to say I do it a lot with people that are a little bit more in tune with the psychological versus physical hunger.
Yes.
Because personally, I'll actually use that there's a couple actual off-season situations that I'll use that in. Like, for example, if somebody, I know that I have them in a surplus, maybe they have a really demanding week and I just need to get them back in a surplus quickly. They've lost some weight. If they're one of those people that can freaking lose weight, like out of nowhere type of person, I'll say, okay, I'm going to have I'll throw those in periodically. And what I'll do is I pretty much know that their body's going to tell them how much it needs. And if they know what they're looking for, it should tell you. I mean, because I will do that with one person, and one week they might eat 400 carbs, and the next week they eat 1,500, and then 2 days after it, they end up in the same point.
Right.
That's because their body needed that week, and they were intuitive enough to listen to those hunger signals and eat accordingly. Which that's, like I said, that's getting a little more advanced as far as like you have to be 100% honest with yourself as far as your biofeedback goes. And for some people, I do like that method though, because what that does do is it does let your body dictate what you need and not necessarily just a number.
Yeah.
But again, that's not even always realistic for some people. Some people, there's just no way that I would say, okay, just for 2 days we're going to refeed. I just want you to eat.
For sure.
And like that just wouldn't be logical.
No, for sure. And the end up at that, and you got to let's say you are done competitive bodybuilding. Let's say you are. We'll use the sacred word that no one ever really means. You're looking to maintain from now on. Intuitive eating, which is basically what you're describing, and just for life, is ideally where you should be. As in, you don't eat till you're stuffed. You know to have a protein. You know, like you just know. You don't even necessarily need to weigh food because you know that is the goal. Like when we're done competing, everything like that is the goal. Because then, like you said, you now know your body. Actually know your body, not just people saying they know their body and now I need a refeed because I don't have an arm pump after one day. Okay, but when you do get to the point in your competitive career when maybe you're thinking of finishing, or even we'll say your fat loss career, doesn't necessarily need to be competitions, but that's the ultimate goal. Like that is so cool. That means that you are now finally free from any mental dilemmas that are controlling your food, and that's super cool.
Yeah, it's and I can almost, with those same people, like, don't get me wrong, I do have some non-competitor clients that they're just super in tune with their own biofeedback. And you know what? I'll say, if I know that they're willing to bust ass during the week, let's say they're in, whether it's off season or whether it's a surplus or a deficit, let's say I want to let them, they have a really rough job or whatever, and they want to let loose on the weekend, and I know that they are in tune with their body. I'll just I'll put them in a very slight surplus during the week, just slight, maybe a little bit less than I would otherwise, and I'll let them eat freely on Saturday, and but their body dictates what they eat.
Awesome. Yep.
You know what I mean? So, and they're completely 100% okay with that. Whereas other people, they don't even want to do that, for one, because they know they won't stay in control.
They're not there yet. They're not there yet.
Right.
Yeah, you got it.
So, but it's the same thing in the fat loss phase. They might say, hey, I'm willing to go into a little bit more of a deficit during the week if I could enjoy myself on Saturday. And I'll normally go that route because I know that this is the type of person that their body will dictate their refeeds. They'll refeed properly. And guess what? It works.
Absolutely. I love that. And that is, there is, I may as well cover every single one of the ways here. Like I love how this is going already, but that is when I learned from the cyclical ketogenic diet, which would be either 5 to 6 days of lower, usually carbs, like that, especially if we're talking about primarily carbs here. And we won't get into the reasons why carbohydrates are the best. We're going to try to keep this as non-science heavy as you can, but it is significantly better to load on carbohydrates than versus fats. It's just not how energy systems pathways work, ladies and gentlemen. But so you have lower carbs. You don't need to be. That's the thing too. When everyone sees refeed, I'm going to go in this quickly. When everyone sees refeeds, they sometimes think like you need like zero carb to be depleted, zero carb to get ready for that refeed. I'll flat out tell you that's not true. Like you can be. I know guys that will need refeeds off at 200 a day, and come the weekend they'll need 1,000 over the weekend. So don't believe the hype of saying, oh, refeeds, I've tried that stuff. That's when I go zero carb for X amount of days. Nah, that's a bunch of crap. So then you do this 5 to 6 days of during the week of lower food. We'll even say just calories, and then come the weekend, you have 1 or 2 days of it being higher, and that also can be really great for life if you're not doing just contest prep, because you can be more social, you can budget things more, and it's the weekend, right? Especially if you have anything close to a classic 9 to 5 job and you have a better schedule at work, you can eat on time, kick ass during the week, and then have a little bit more relaxed on the weekend. Like, especially if we're got an advanced person that even needs to look into refeeds. And that's where I was going to go with that. As Scott Abel came up with the super compensation diet, or he now calls it the cycle diet, whereas he would even go a little bit past tolerable hunger and really kick some ass. And I do like this approach, and it does work for anyone that does it, because he says have a day off in terms of he's famous for eating a full box of cereal for his breakfast. The dude's 54. He looks great, but it's you got to get there, right? You do have to be able to put that serious work in. This is not, okay, I'm going to do 30 minutes of cardio, I'm going to eat my food, I'm going to train. No, you are going to train everything off. The cardio is going to be of a good intensity so that your body is ready to suck up all that food, and that it can eat more than what you'd think on paper and either look better or the same. Right. Yeah.
Yep. I totally agree. And I think that you can, like I said, you could apply that to, you can apply that to anyone really, as long as the person is in tune enough to handle the refeeding period or whatever you want to call it without having numbers in front of them. So
absolutely.
And right now in my off season, actually, and I've done this the last couple off seasons, this has been really successful for me, is I kind of call my Saturday, I call it a refeed because I do it the whole day long. So, and what I'll do is I let my body basically self-regulate at that point. My week, because the thing is about the week is that you know you're in a surplus on paper, but I mean, you can't always judge it by body weight and things like that, because, there's inflammation, there's water retention, there's sleep patterns might vary slightly. I mean, there's a lot of things that can affect weight. So what I'll do is, if I maintain my calories all through the week, I'll basically refeed all day on a carb-based meals with protein. I have protein in there, normally less, and then I'll have carb-based meals all day long, whereas normally I would time my carbs, around training and what have you.
Yep.
But I'll have carb meals all day long, and then what I'll do is the next morning I'll fast. And what I'll do, and see what I do with the fast is I will look at myself on Sunday morning and look at what I weigh and look at, just those markers, essentially those two markers. And I can basically determine, okay, I'm going to fast for, what I'll end up doing is I'll either have 2 meals for that day or I'll have 3 meals for that day. And I normally just dictate that in the morning as to how long I need to fast. Did I spill over a slight bit? Do I need to fast a little bit longer? And then I'll do that. And it works really, really well, because that Sunday resets my insulin sensitivity, clears out inflammation, so I'm primed for the week. My appetite's good. And then that Saturday, basically, it just helps with that really long, grueling week that I just had.
Exactly. Yep.
So it works really well. And I'm super in tune. I mean, I know what I eat, and I'll do anything from 3 to 5 carb meals on that day, heavy carb meals. And I can tell you right now that I eat drastically different amounts some weeks than others, because I just know that where my hunger is and what I need and what I look like. If I train on that morning, for example, that would make a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And let's talk about that too, because I know
perfect.
You mentioned refeeding on training days versus non-training days, and I think, and I can talk about both too, but I wanted to let you touch on that.
So when I first started hearing about it, we'll say on the forums and things like that, when guys were doing it right, in a sense of, it was one of the great debates where guys would say that they wanted to load up pre-lift. I know especially powerlifters, their thing was load up so that they have some form of bloat going on, so that they could actually have more leverage for their their squat volume and their lifts like that. So that's not us necessarily, but you have to think though too, this was also diving into the same mentality and methodology of when you eat calories before a workout, you are usually going to have more energy for the workout, outside of some people that could be maybe naturally naturally adapted to fasted training, which I don't want to get into. But so that was the one, is that you could have your refeed or your cheat day or whatever the heck you want to call it before your lift to try to really gun everything in there. And then the other way I saw it too was that now you train, and then afterwards you would stuff all the food into you, because now your metabolism is higher and everything else potentially after the workout. Or the third option was that your rest day was your rest day, which you did no cardio unless it was you woke up, fasted, did the cardio, and then dove in on the form of refeed. And I have found for myself and for pretty much every client I do have is that I will have them have it on the rest day where everything is off, so that it's basically the car is shut off and you're now changing the tires, you're changing the oil, everything is getting scrubbed up. And because it is, you don't need to be, where this comes from is a little bit interesting too. I haven't quite figured it out. Where people think you need to be eating the carbohydrates for the glycogen super compensation immediately after a workout. Like I'm talking as soon as you're done the last set, the carbs are going in the mouth. Your body depleted. Like it might be slightly better, but no, if you are flat, like when you say you wake up in the morning and you can pull that 4 inches of skin off of your quad, like that's your body's still going, where the hell are those carbs? So your body will still suck it up on that next day, and that still will be, if you're hitting it right, in that super compensation. So, but not only that, I will give a personal anecdote. It wasn't for training, but so I was about midway through my skip load, and I was like, oh crap, I forgot to do my cardio yesterday. I may as well go in and do it today. I will tell you, ladies and gentlemen, any form of cardio, when you have a massive influx of carbohydrates in you, not only will you sweat and not sweat, it will be like a sticky, syrupy sweat, but you will feel like more death than any cardio you have ever done. So I really firmly believe that if you do have cardio the day of your refeed, do it in the morning or before, or else don't bother.
Yep. So, okay. Are you having folks train after the day after these refeeds?
Yes, usually, and I've believed into this for quite some time. What I would have them do is wake up, do list cardio fast if they could, because I don't want them dipping into the glycogen too hard by doing any kind of HIIT training. I don't want that to budge at all. And then maybe a meal or two in, and then usually outside, unless it's arms, maybe, still doubt it, I would like them to get their body part that they suck at the most, and that's the best day of the week. Especially come deep into prep, you are going to have 2, 3, 4 days of where your training intensity is back to as much as it can. So I'd rather people put it on that day.
Good. Okay. So I do it. I will say that I've done it both ways with people as far as training on the day, not training on the day. One thing I do like to do if I am having them train on a day is sometimes it's just schedule related. It's just strictly schedule related, and
that's perfect that you answered that. So I was talking.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to cut you off, but that was me completely. That is ideal conditions for me, as in I did not have any commitments. Like I didn't have to take the kids to the fair on the Saturday. It was a day off. Not everyone can afford, literally and figuratively, a day off from the gym to just sit around and literally eat, and that's part of your scheduled in your part of your prep, is that's your day. So yeah, perfect. You said that. So yeah, for schedule, keep going. Sorry. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, and with the schedule part of it, if that is the case, then what I'll typically have them do is train in the morning, before they start loading.
Got it.
And half the time I'll have them train fasted or semi-fasted, if I can. And then we'll go into it. So that's not really, in that case, they're getting up early, they're doing their thing, and then they don't have to worry about it the rest of the day. So it's not a whole lot different. I mean, they are training on the day of, but it's not like they ate 400 carbs and then they're going to go in and train and then eat 400 more.
Right.
That I'm not a fan of, to be completely honest. I mean, I had to train on my first refeed day in the prep, and that was honestly just a schedule thing. But I would always train pretty much fasted.
Hmm.
Um, and I mean, I felt shitty either way, so it didn't really, it
Yeah,
didn't really make
that's the
a
caveat to it,
significant
though. Eh?
difference.
That yeah, if you're fasted and you already are, let's say, deep in the prep, we're 4, 6 weeks out, 8 weeks out, whatever, we're close, and you do have the lower energy reserves, and the refeed is what you physiologically need. It's coming that day. Yeah, that's I would probably just and you can agree or disagree. That's probably when I would put something like arms or not.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
I
for
wouldn't
sure.
I wouldn't put legs. Let's put it that way.
No, I wasn't squatting that morning
Yeah,
or anything.
exactly.
Trust me. Uh, but I would say I don't mind having them do it on a rest day, and I like all the points you made. And the only time that I probably wouldn't have them do that, because I do have people do it that way also, is strictly from the way that they feel. If there's someone that trains in the morning and then the morning after they feel kind of sluggish, well, I'm going to do one of two things. Maybe it's just food selection. Maybe the food selection was causing too much inflammation and they're a little bogged down the next morning,
Hmm.
in which case we could maybe just correct it through food selection. We might not even have to do anything else. Um, or, maybe their blood sugar is still slightly elevated, and it hasn't, fasting blood sugar hasn't quite returned to baseline. I might, I might not have them train the next day or right away the next day. But in general, if I'm having them train on the day of the refeed, I almost always prefer that it's done as early in the day as possible and away from the refeeding. Not so much like, no, they can't go eat after the refeed. I mean, or after the training. Well, obviously that's okay.
Hmm.
But like I said, I'd like to have them do it fasted or just with EAAs or with a hydrolyzed protein or something,
Hmm.
um,
Hmm. Yep.
that morning. But that's about as close to the refeed as I'm going to get. I would never really suggest anyone do it smack dab in the middle. Like, think of my reef. There's no way. There's
No,
absolutely no way
exactly,
that I would,
exactly.
like,
Yep.
no, God. I mean, I felt like I got hit by a bus by the end of the day. I mean, and there was so much, and when you're getting that depleted, all the neurotransmitters, the catecholamines, like the serotonin,
Hmm.
you are so freaking jacked up and out in left field and high, basically,
Oh yeah,
that,
absolutely.
that there's just no way that I was going to train.
No, it's just it takes the brain to a different spot, right? Like I even call it for people that don't necessarily know that feeling. I call it turkey dinner syndrome. It's like when you've eaten a big turkey dinner and you feel sleepy, like that is what you might feel in between. You feel good, feel full, and between that and the potential bloat, like you're not really gonna be in the optimal physical shape at that time to go train. Even if your brain was like, "Holy crap, yeah, I think feeling good is coming back," I would still just wait till the tank is completely full, because then we're filling the tank, and then we're trying to deplete the tank at the same time. That's when I started moving into the science realm. I was like, why would I try to flip off or turn off the tap that I'm filling up the muscles midday only to try to turn it back on again? Like again, maybe like I still haven't ran into a circumstance where I've needed to do that with a client in terms of workout schedule or whatever, but that I think would be the least ideal time for sure.
Hmm. Yeah, I
So,
mean, I don't,
oh,
I
go
don't
ahead.
have much to add to that.
Okay, perfect. As I wanted, so that you're playing it up for me here, big time, buddy. So let's say they get into the whopping refeeds. Let's say that just like you said, the food is higher, and let's say that it's not. We looked into the sources of foods. This would be a really good time to not only add in some GDAs, glucose disposal agents, but also add in enzymes. Because
Yep.
a lot of people, and I'm a big fan of no digestive enzymes during the off season. I'm a very firm believer in your body should be creating the enzymes thanks to it being in an off season surplus. Whereas as soon as we get into contest prep, excuse me again, we we start losing them. Like, you know, that if we start eating the same foods, it's chicken, 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 chicken. Your body will lose, at least for a bit, the steak enzyme, and steak will feel bad. Or I'm not so, but let's even say we want to refeed on sweet potatoes, and for some reason we've only been using rice. The digestive enzymes plus the high volume of food will help. because a lot. So that is, especially if you notice the next day that distension is still there, even on quality of food sources, that can really speed things along for them in terms of not only the efficacy of the refeed, but as in them feeling significantly less like death on that day as well.
Yeah, I mean you nailed it because your enzymes are down regulated from you eating less.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Obviously, I mean they go up and down according to what you're eating. So if you have a huge influx, especially in a case like mine, I mean, I absolutely had to use digestive enzymes, and um I would use several digestive supplements, but I had to because that the gastric emptying would be just so slow
Exactly.
if I
Yes.
did it. Um, so at that point, yeah, absolutely. I totally agree.
And I'm going to touch on that one more time. I love you said the gastric emptying is that on these days, if you do push a significant amount of carbohydrates, which obviously someone like Austin did, lay off the vegetables.
Oh
Because
yeah.
the fiber is going to jump into your stomach. It is going to convolute. It's going to bulk. And it's just something that's not wanted that day. Not only that, but you are getting enough fiber through. Don't be a complete donkey and have nothing but high fructose corn syrup as your carb. But it'll take up too much space from the refeed. But then it won't get, you know what I mean? It's just not plausible for during that time. You've been eating the vegetables, you've been eating micronutrients all week. It's going to be okay with a couple days of limited or none. You will be fine. It's okay.
Oh yeah, it's fine. And you're getting, granted, your rice has a lot less carbs than veggies, and your potatoes, but you're still, the fact that you're eating so much more, so many more carbs, you're still getting fiber.
Well, that's exactly my point. Like in all of that, but you will experience an influx of the number twos that are knocking at your door, either that day, the next day, like, and that's a darn good thing. Like, and I love seeing that every time. Like, let's say for whatever reason, I pay attention to bowel movements. If bowel movements get down too low, something is not going on right. Even if the volume of food is low during the week, we still want something there. That's called being regular. But then, yeah, you will be up on that, and that means okay, cool. We still have, we'll say, full digestion and bowel evacuation processes going on, which is even more cool. Then you can assess that there. And again, like Austin said, that if you don't have that, that just might be the food choices. Again, you're putting in things that are a little bit too sluggish on your own personal GI tract's mood, and you need to do something a little bit different.
So maybe we should
go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was going to say on the food choice, maybe we should briefly touch on that.
Sure. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, because I think that, well, it obviously just depends on the person as far as what they can tolerate. But my thing is, we know, hey, you're probably already going to be up in weight because of obviously glycogen for one,
right.
In water, obviously. But I'm just not a huge fan of taking in giant, like making all your carbs super high, inflammatory type carbs, and just skewing how you look so badly that it takes me like 4 days to figure out what's actually going on.
Mm-hmm.
That just bugs me a little bit because I know, hey, maybe you still had a similar effect, and it's not going to hurt your body comp in the long term, but it just makes me like, okay, I really don't even know what you look like for a few days just because you just ate, complete and utter garbage all day long. So I kind of do, and that, again, that's also person dependent. Like I have a guy that
entirely true. Yes.
I have a guy that he looks like, it's hilarious because, Joe, for example, Joe is
absolutely Joe Jeffrey.
Yeah. So if I had him refeed with, and he did and kind of an extended refeed, like one of the off-season situations that I talked about, and he did cereal. That's an easy choice. That's usually relatively safe for most people. And all of the cereal he ate with like real milk and tons of it.
No way, and he did good with it, eh?
No, he was fine. He was fine, and I'm like, man, you never even have dairy, and you just drank like a fucking half gallon of milk.
That fucking dick.
and I'm thinking, dude, I would have been wrecked.
Absolutely. Oh man, I can just see it. I can see it now, like the toilet and the lack thereof. Like,
yeah, I would have been completely wrecked. And like for me personally, with those big refeeds, I've messed around with just about any food source you can think of, and in moderation, everything's okay, like in a small amount. But
Mhm.
I notice some really inflammatory carbs, like if I'm just pounding gluten heavy carbs all day long, my fingers will be swollen the next day. And no, I'm not. I don't have celiacs. Like
No,
I don't. You know,
it's just what happens, right? Yeah.
yeah. And because that's a gluten is a protein that it can potentially be a little harder for some people to break down.
Hmm.
And yeah, and it could be slightly inflammatory. And it's the same with anything that's super highly processed. I mean, it has a ton of chemical additives or whatever it might be. It's just going to make the toxic, and I hate to use that freaking word.
No,
I hate to
I
say
know.
toxins. I hate to say
Not body
toxins,
friendly. Not body friendly. Yeah.
but our bodies are made to get rid of and discard toxins like that. That is what they're made to do. But if your toxic load is massive, you're going to have inflammation.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Yep.
yeah. So, I mean, if you have a gigantic influx in one day, I guarantee you're going to have some inflammation. And like I said, if the inflammation is so bad that it's disrupting your GI tract and it's disrupting the way you look for several days, then you probably ought to reevaluate your food choices.
It's wonderful you said that because I have written down sugar in GI because if you did have that all, we'll say processed, all sugary, all anyone but Joe dairy refeed, you will you will potentially now be screwing your digestion for days after that. And that enzymes won't always do everything. You do like digestion. I can't begin to convey how to you the listeners that how important digestive health is during the entire prep. Like if you aren't pooping, constipation is so terrible. If you don't feel good, if foods feel like bricks in your stomach, anything we can do to make that better outside of sure, let's sneak in a treat or something if we want to. The refeed is a good time to do it, but don't like this you got a show coming up. Like distended abdomen is very real. You not being able to absorb foods at the right times on show day is very real. So keeping that in line just has to be on coach and competitor's mind. Like, and it is, let's say you screwed it up the first time. Okay, cool. You know what? Let's tone down the Skittles. But no, you just can't. And then on top of that too, I wanted to really click into, I learned this from Justin Harris is kind of the low, medium, high days of carbohydrates. So this is like actually carb cycling, right? So this can be used. You can give your own opinions too, which I definitely want to hear. But my opinion is that carbohydrate cycling is advanced in the sense if you do have low, medium, and high days, it can start to get a little bit tedious on the brain. As in, like Tuesday's a high day. Oh shoot, no, Tuesday's a medium day. So it does get a little bit convoluted in that sense. Like maybe you can, and this I'll give a little brief how to. You would structure high days, and this is when I started to drift away from doing this kind of process. I haven't done this in a while with my clients because it goes directly in the face of the whole take your day off and have it be your high day. But usually on these forms of, we'll call them carb cycling diets, on your high day would be your heaviest body parts. So like let's say back or legs. Then your medium days would be on like shoulders, arms, maybe chest if it's not so strength there, and then your low days or no days would be on your days off. So is that how you've seen it kind of usually set up, or do you have it set up differently?
Yeah. It's set up the same, and I'll chime in on it too when you're done because I have a couple thoughts.
Yep. So you do this for that is now the preloading, because like you could try and do it the other way, but let's say we do it this way. Is that so? Then the purpose is that obviously your leg days are going to move more tonnage and going to move more energy or output. You're going to expend more energy. So that's the thought behind that. And then on the off days, you don't need as much energy to propel you during the day. You've only got NEAT going on and whatever else during your day. And this is also when the theory, and if you nail it, I have seen it happen fairly often. If you want to be this meticulous with your type of plan, you can have those off days be, in a sense, a day of fat burning. Yes, you can. And then the high days you can be, we'll call it maximal muscle growth. But you got to be really nutbag in a sense of wanting to do this style. But if you expect it to be some kind of absolute magic pony, Just try it out and not really hold any super high this is going to happen expectations from it, because it is good. I did enjoy. Justin Harris was the god on that for me. He taught me all about what the calculations of what he likes for the higher days on legs, and then he would even use the higher days on legs with a cheat meal at the end if we wanted to then really suck up the food after the harder leg day. And then the last thing I wanted to talk to about that before I give you ask for your opinion on it, Austin, was depletion workouts really quickly. So like, and I've known people too, like how you said the morning before the refeed, sometimes people would get up and work out. I'm not the biggest fan, even though there is quote unquote science there, but it wasn't done on very trained athletes, let alone bodybuilders, that doing depletion workouts. And when I say depletion workouts, this means lots and lots of reps, lots and lots of sets, potentially supersets, to try to suck the last little drop of muscle glycogen out. I find if you are in even beginner/advanced, then advanced into intermediate, beginner/intermediate into intermediate, and then advanced is not a ranked novice. You don't need that. You are going to get enough. If your program is sound, you are going to get enough depletion as it is just by hammering out the exercises. So just keep on. Don't change your entire workout world or program just because you're going to have a refeed. Like, don't do some wacky 30 ankle kicks, this chest flies for 15 superset. I just don't think it's needed. So what's your opinion not only on like the 3 or 2 day carb cycle for off season or fat loss, and what do you think about the depletion workouts before your refeed days?
I wouldn't have anyone change the workouts at all.
My man.
Yeah. I didn't specify that, but no, I don't have anyone change the workouts. I don't think you're insulin sensitive at that point. You're already depleted. You should be, because if you're not, you probably don't need the refeed in the first place.
Read the refeed. Thank you.
Yes, that's it. Like you pretty much answer your own question. Like
exactly.
It's the whole scenario already answers the question for you. So as far as the rotation goes, I do like it. It is very meticulous, like you said. I think that it could be, if you have a lot of time, like if you literally, I'm going to go at this for as long as whatever until I feel like I look good, you could essentially recomp or at least hold as maximal muscle tissue with that kind of rotation, just on paper, because you're having surplus days, you're having primary lipolysis days where you're burning fat, and primary hypertrophy days, or whatever you want to call them. So yeah, I think it's great. And I think it works in prep too. It's just the one thing that I find with it is there's a mental block for a lot of people, because they think they're supposed to feel a certain way on the high days and supposed to feel a certain way on the low days and feel a certain way on the, on the medium days or whatever. And then that can start impeding training too. So that, it's psychologically, they put in different efforts on different days, which obviously I think, I really don't think that there's a whole lot of difference. Like when I did it, I didn't feel any difference between a high and a medium day normally, because I didn't expect there to be a difference. I just went in and trained. Granted, a super low day, you might feel a little bit different, but in general, it's kind of like that. One, it's tedious, and secondly, there's that mental block. But if someone doesn't have any problem with that, and they have enough time, I will do rotations, because essentially what you're doing there is we talked about those adaptions, and we talked about how maintenance or a slight caloric surplus is good to reverse those adaptions, but it's also good for preventing them. So if you're sprinkling those in there, you're less likely to have those metabolic adaptions. What's going to happen is you're going to get leaner, and that in itself will cause adaptions. Getting lean will cause some metabolic slowdown. It will cause leptin levels to go down, but you don't have the extreme constant caloric restriction also contributing to it. At least it's only one part, it's only like one negative and not both.
Right.
So,
exactly. That's exactly it. So I would say too, and this is usually my primary consideration, is that with, let's say, a 300-pound ripped bodybuilder, LOL, I have one. Then the low, medium, and high days are going to have some significant differences to them, right? Let's just make something up. Let's say they have a 200 carb day, 300 carb day, and let's say they have a 550 on the leg day. Okay, but let's say you are figure and smaller. Not saying that some figure girls can't eat, but I'm saying now you're looking at, let's say, 1100 versus 1300 versus maybe 1450, 1500 calories. And all that, but then that just gets flat out annoying in terms of me having to guide as a coach. Because now, typically, I do need them to weigh every day for a bit because I want to see after that high day, did they blow way over on weight? Do I need to adjust that? When do I need to take out the medium days? I saw that Justin had a pretty cut and dry. He's like, yeah, go into the medium days, take the medium days out first, just go into the low and the high days, and eventually just go into the low with the refeed. And I really like that. So, but like, so for like, let's say a lighter lady, the medium day probably won't even need to be on your radar, for instance. So it's like you're just, it's just not only functionally not necessary, but then mentally the whole needing to label high, medium, and low Tupperware is just kind of getting, let's say, out of control there. So it's hard for a coach to really kind of gauge that because it's a lot more work to, like you were talking about, like what if they feel like this on this day? Is it from this? Is it from that? As opposed to we have things moderately set, like say the standard refeed that we're talking about, you're going to have feelings over the non-refeed days, and so like I'll talk about that just slight more. Is that with the day after the day after all the refeeds are done, you're Superman. The second day medium, third day probably getting back down there, fourth day probably the hardest, and that's also this is great. The also thing that is great about that kind of refeed is that by the time, let's say, the Friday comes, like that the only is the refeed coming, but mentally now you've only got to do 1 week of dieting as opposed to the 16 weeks.
Yep.
So then, because then even if you're like, oh my God, I got another 14, 13, 10 weeks up. No, you've got 2 days, man, of feeling like pretty crappy.
Yep.
Is that, yeah, because and that can save you, man. Like it's got to have saved you at a couple points.
Oh, I mean, don't get me wrong. Like I'm a sick individual, but like I'm not gonna say that on if I started refeeding on a Friday and I pretty much knew on Thursday that it was coming the next day. Like I was thinking about it,
Yeah.
No doubt about it. And I think it's actually really funny that you brought up using the cyclical approach on on a smaller competitor or a smaller individual, because if I see somebody, I get this too. They send me, and it's nothing against the client because they don't know. They just were listening to their coach or whoever was helping them, and their diet says they were doing a high day and they were doing a low day. Let's just say it's a 2-way rotation.
I think I know where you're going with this, but I'm gonna wait. Awesome. Go ahead. Yeah.
Their high day, like what they did on their high days, they added a half a cup of oatmeal on their first meal. And I'm like,
I was gonna say, it was like,
God, that is not anything.
20 to 30 carbs. I'm like, that is a high day. Oh,
I'm like,
man.
What are you talking about?
I love it. And so like, no, like, so you know what? My basic standard quote unquote diet for people that aren't competing or fat loss, I would have them just because and this, like, I'm going to give away the Mega Marty secrets here, everybody. You will not need to hire me as a coach ever again once you hear these sweet magical words. I would give them a singular Pop-Tart with a protein shake after their workouts on training days. So, and I never once said on your high day. It was, I don't even know what I call it. I said workout days and non-workout days, just as something that, now I'm tricking these people into thinking that Pop-Tarts are amazing.
Right.
And it is the exact same frigging thing as going and buying a carb powder for the general population, unless you have some kind of severe, rare Pop-Tartalactic-itis that you can't have it. But, and that screwed people up in a hilarious way. They're like, oh my God, this guy can get Pop-Tarts. Either turn people towards me or turn people away. This is 2009, man. I have my weightlifting belt says King Pop-Tart on it. I think it's hilarious. But like, for me to say that 35 grams of carbs was a high day, that's blasphemy, for frig's sake.
It's oh, dude, I like a little part of me dies inside
Oh, I know.
when I
Yep.
see that. And it's so, I mean, the point there is obviously if your caloric intake's already pretty low, then the rotation might not be realistic with, as realistic with you. It might be a little more realistic to do just a straight deficit and refeed.
Exactly. So, and like we'll talk about this slightly a little bit here. We'll let this episode run long because this is a darn good one here. But if you are having, let's say, 700 grams of carbohydrates, will make it nice and even for your week. Look at it as your macro cycle. Like, so your macros on your macro cycle. So as opposed to microcycle being a day, is that you can, for all intents and purposes, until you get to some kind of form of super compensation mode or severe glycogen depletion, you can play around with those frigging carbs. If you want 100 each day, like we just said, like that's nice and even, cool. You want 150 on some days, 50 on other days, based upon, like, let's say you play hockey on a Wednesday night, maybe you want that to be a little bit higher so you got more jam to go for the hockey. And people get so carried away with that. I think that's where this whole a high day is 25 carb, like that's just not it, man. They're not playing enough with the macronutrient around, let alone if they're looking for that physiological response. And no offense, like, yeah, like I will definitely say that because the clients I was giving the Pop-Tart to, they weren't depleted, but it was definitely more of a fun and exciting thing, or something hilarious that they could kind of brand and say, oh, you got to be Marty's client then. But that's not enough to excite anyone. Like, would you say a third of a cup of oatmeal extra? No one's going, yes, it's the third of a cup of oatmeal extra day. They got it on their phone, screensaver, alarm goes off. It's extra day, baby. Like, no, it's just,
well, man. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, this kind of like starts putting me on the terrible coach rant, and I'm not going to go down that.
I'm cutting you off on that one. There's no terrible coach. No.
We're not going down that rabbit hole today. We are providing information to you listeners, so we won't do that.
You got it. So outside of that, and then because I said at the beginning, I want to make sure that was inclusive. So I said the cyclical ketogenic diet, which would be some form of lower to no carbs with higher carbs on the weekend, so like a refeed. The targeted ketogenic diet, which is very popular in our line of work in the bodybuilding scene, which means you would target your carbohydrates pre, during, and post-workout. So as opposed to having some form of refeed, because there can be certain types of foods, like I was saying, how Austin said he would have his clients fast, or even with a little bit of EAAs, maybe some Pepto Pro or some good carb powder, because that can really drive you up if you have the right good digesting food in you to go into the gym and be a beast, in a sense. I hate beast mode, but friggin', I'm going in. Beast mode in the gym, that can help you out a lot. And so that's another way to it's not a refeed, but it is cyclical dieting, which was kind of the topic here. So that's another form that you can do. You can eat we'll say 30 to an hour before, maybe have an intra drink. It's special circumstances. And if you're thinking about trying out one of these diets yourselves that we're talking about, don't do that one in a sense of, don't do that one first, because I would much rather you eat your food, especially if you are just starting out, or even if you're not in like deep into prep, trying to push more food in by doing that kind of protocol. But just, it's not worth it to have 50 grams of carb powder when you've got 150 grams of carbs per day. Have the freaking food for satiety reasons, for your brain reasons, for everything else. Yeah.
I don't even. Once people get to a certain point in prep, if they are using intra workout, I cut it out typically.
Yep. Me too. I just the benefit added for their strength being up ever so slightly, wherever, at the detriment of them going to bed gnawing their elbow off. It's never been there psychologically for me.
No, I agree. I agree. So I like that you touched on the different KD diets.
The KD diets, right? Yeah, because that's all you need to say. They're like, oh, I want it on the craft dinner diet.
So, technically, if you want to be really technical about it, I think what I was doing would be considered. It would also be kind of from Lyle's book. Not that I don't know that I pulled it directly from something he did, but right. It was a protein sparing modified fast was basically what it was.
Yep.
That's essentially what I end up doing at the end of prep, and with those longer refeeding periods, because I'm pretty sure that by his definition of that, they were doing like 2-day basically free eating or something.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
At the end. So when it wasn't exact, but yeah, that was, I guess that's another one that you guys could look up. That's one though, if you're looking at doing that as a cyclical approach, that it's not usually not long term for
Nope.
one, and
Nope.
secondly, you might use it to either a jumpstart a diet. If you're really overweight, you might use it to jumpstart a diet, or you might use it to finish off, an extreme fat loss phase.
Correct.
But again, a very acute situation. You're not going to be wanting to do this for 2-3 months, anything like that.
No, and I will say that too, and it depends on the skill level of the client in terms of where they like in terms of they know their food. Do they know that protein is not peanut butter, blah blah blah, and so kids, protein is not peanut butter. Peanut butter is not protein. Anyways, but so if you talk to someone, and we have a very good motivational marker, like as in, like, okay, we'll call it very good and terrible to say, Tam. They need to get in shape for whatever reason, photo shoot, whatever, last minute for 4 weeks from now. If you can, and this is going to come probably as the most controversial part in this podcast, but seeing as what you just said, Austin, I know that this is going to be something up your alley that you'll like too. I will encourage a crash diet, but I call it a controlled crash diet. If you have never jumped out, like, it is mandatory that you jump out of an airplane tandem because you've never done it. So if you are going to do this, you are jumping out of the airplane with Marty and Austin. Think about how frigging amazing that day would be. No, we're not having a contest anytime soon, but we will keep it in the ideas for you. So you jump out of the airplane with someone that knows how to do this protein-sparing modified fast, because basically what that means is you are eating pretty much solely protein, vegetables, and getting some micronutrients through potentially vitamins for a very set amount of time. And as Austin said, this is not something you do long-term by any stretch. It's just not enough. So if you are really, really heavy and you are like, you know what, I am sick of this, I want to see some big numbers to motivate me, you can do this. There is a calculation behind it. You can hire one of us, because I'm not telling you anything on how to do that perfectly, because that's a can of worms. Marty put me on this. No, he did not. But I'm saying, yeah, you can effectively and completely healthily use a controlled crash diet at times to get things really, really moving.
Yep, you absolutely can, and I wouldn't suggest doing it on your own, like you said, unless you absolutely know what you're doing. Because yeah, you want to do it long enough to get result, but short enough that you're not going to completely downregulate all your hormones, metabolism, etc.
Got it. And so that's a perfect segue. So I really like let's say, even if not, depending upon if I've worked with them, their mind frame, they know how I work, they know how they work. Let's say the client came and they had a little bit of a rough, like for whatever reason, they did their own off season or something, and they came to me and they were a little bit behind at the beginning of the prep. I will go right into that and then continue the cyclical diet after that, because it will push you into that super compensation mode that much quicker. Jack that cardio up at the beginning, jack that food down, and then bump it back up. And that blows people's mind that you can do that. You start on something, well, definitely for what the layman would think, definitely an extreme diet, and then you can back off the gas pedal. And that's cool, because if they know how to work and they've competed before and they know what they're getting themselves into, you could definitely jack up that cardio to every day or whatever, and then back off as soon as they're at a relative point, and then they can restore leptin, restore T3. Ghrelin will still be fine. Nothing will be hurt cosmetically. Nothing will be hurt mentally, because they know what they're getting themselves into.
Yep. And I've done it. I mean, I've done it with people. I'll do that. I'll even do that when we can make this another episode, but I'll even do that in mini cuts in the off season.
I love it. Yeah, absolutely. You got it.
And I'm not going to go into all that because we can make an episode out of some of that stuff. So, but yeah, there's certainly situations where you can defy the rules and basically it's a strategic starving method.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in strategic starving, because in the media, all you see is the starve with no end. And as we just talked about, the whole 8, 8, and 4, that doesn't even apply to this. This would be something, let's say 2 to 4. I don't think I've ever gone past 4 weeks in this aggressiveness. Just, you will get tired, your lifts will start sucking, your sleep will start sucking, and you will not want to do it. And then that could literally break you, even some of the toughest willed people. The last thing that I've got for you, Austin, is that how you said that when you would do, some of the people would really hammer it during the week, and then on one of the days or 2 of the days on the weekend, how you would say eat intuitively. The way that I kind of do it, the mega way, which is better than yours, is like I will still give them a protein marker. I'll say, okay, hit 200 grams of protein today, which will usually be less than their usual protein, but I'll say, you know what, this is all I want you to do. And that has saved people, because let's say I say to someone, eat intuitively, and they go, oh, I don't want to, and they just really enjoy weighing their food. I got a new girl, Tamara, that's just going to be hanging out with me for a bit, and she goes, I love weighing my food. It actually is a stress relief. It's something I've got in control of my life. I'm like, you know what? Cool. So she would be a perfect example of where I would say, I want at least 20 grams of protein in during the day, usually split up if you can, and then the rest is kind of you do it intuitively. And so then we at minimum got that protein marker for the protein turnover, nitrogen synthesis, the whole thing, and then they can, have a little bit of a bigger peace of mind that they're not off a plan, if that makes sense. Because when someone says the plan is no plan, that can also screw with people a little bit here and there.
Yeah, there's people that I won't even suggest that to, because
of course not. I'm saying if they are there, that's what I usually like to. I say, I want to see this much protein, please.
Yep, I agree. Well, yeah, because obviously you want muscle protein synthesis.
Correct. Yep. Because or let's say you tell them that, and unfortunately sometimes they will say the unaware clients, they won't necessarily know to do that, right? And then, but you say that once, then they go, oh, okay, every time he's going to expect around this much protein for sure.
Yeah, because we're still bodybuilders and physique-minded individuals at the end of the day. I mean, we know we need protein. So
yep, exactly, you got it.
We just the lower end of the spectrum.
Mm-hmm. You got it. Well, my man, I think we covered everything on cyclical dieting and refeeds and shitloads and skip loads and carb cycling and TKDs and every other type of craft dinner diet. It actually stands for cyclical, targeted, and standard ketogenic. It's not craft dinner diet. Don't people, Marty's has recommended the craft dinner diet on there. No, that's okay.
Marty's got those little microwavable macaroni and cheese bowls.
Oh yeah, craft, for sure, portioned out. Now you also know the Pop-Tart diet, which is even... That's going to be the one. You wait. People are going to resurge up again. Be like, Marty gives all of his clients Pop-Tarts. That's it. Yep.
It's hilarious. Good. It's hilarious because we've gone through phases. Like there was like the Pop-Tart phase, and there was the Rice Krispie treat phase, and then it's like, I'm like, you guys do realize that none of that matters, right?
And that's why it was so cool, because this is it. This is just fun tidbit. When If It Fits Your Macros came out, when Alan Aragon and the dudes on the forums were talking about If It Fits Your Macros, and then he put out his very, very, very good book, buy it, called Girth Control, if you're interested in it. When he first started talking about how that's why it's there. If it fits your macros, it doesn't really matter. So then all of a sudden, a couple of people all said, this is terrible. You can never do this. And I'm still, it has to be a certain way. Of course, it's not all Pop-Tarts, micronutrients. That's a whole other talk for another day. But it would, to watch the sources rotate, like it went I was part of the 2007, 2009, where it was Pop-Tarts era, because it was a relatively low fat carbohydrate thing you could bring to the gym with your protein shake. Like that was the whole thing. And then then you saw Chris Aceto giving Dusty Hanshaw cans of Fanta, and I remember him walking out of the grocery store being like, don't tell anybody my secrets. And it was 2 cans of Fanta, which I was like, this is awesome, right? And then it went to cinnamon buns, and then it went to muffins, and it was cookies, and people really straight up thought, it's got to be the cookies that's making him do it. I got to do it too. And I love it.
It's like, dude, oh God. Well, that's another thing. That's another one of those makes me die inside moments.
Yeah, absolutely. Just makes me die inside. And I did. I literally had people locally say, Marty gives, like, all Marty's clients were Pop-Tarts, which turned into Marty's clients only eat Pop-Tarts. I was like, well, then you tell me why they look so, you tell me why they look so damn good and keep winning shows. And that's, oh man. Yep. That's it for me, man.
Yep.
We should just do a rant day.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, they don't want that. People, yeah, they would never. I would get kicked off. You would be like, "Hey, Marty, I'm going to mute your mic now."
Okay.
I'm good, man. I think that covers all the major bases.
Okay, well then, from Marty and Austin here at the Mind Body Broadcast, keep fit, have fun. We'll see you next time.
See you guys.